NBA Draft Big Board Wednesday. Is it possible Taylor Hendricks drops to 9 and then the Jazz take a point guard at 16? We're talking about it next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm David Locke, radio voice of Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. Today on Locked on Jazz, we look at all of the competing big boards from The Ringer, from Leaf to Lean, from ESPN, and we look and see what the trends are of where players are. And one thing it may lead to is a question of whether the Jazz look at Taylor Hendricks out of the University of Central Florida. I'll give you a deeper, bigger breakdown on him and then discuss whether if that kind of player is available at 9, do we think there's a point guard good enough at 16 to make the play where you allow that player to slip down to 16, or at least the choices are good enough for you? Plus, NBA rumors floating around where guys are working out. Interesting little free agent note out of Milwaukee. We'll look at that as well on today's show. If we get time, Dame Lillard with some interesting comments out of Portland. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much to all of you for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day, and a huge shout out to all the everydayers who join us Monday through Friday as we bring the show to you each and every day. It's about 30 minutes for you to get updated on everything involved with the Utah Jazz. It's free on all podcasting apps. It's free on YouTube. You can hit the subscribe or the follow button and join us. We really enjoy it. Great conversation always going on YouTube. The Wednesday edition, which is today, brought to you by Game Time, the Game Time app. Create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA, get 20% off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So let's look at the boards of the top kind of people. Athletic, Sam Vecini does not have his out right now. So look at ESPN, look at The Ringer, look at Leaf to Lean. There are CBS Sports has it. Gary Parrish does a mock draft. I don't trust that mock draft as much as some others, but it came out literally 6 hours ago, so I'm going to include that. So everyone's universal on Victor at 1, everyone's universal on Brandon Miller at 2, and everyone's universal at Scoot Henderson at 3. The draft starts at 4. And I don't think the impact of the draft hits the Jazz right away. But what is interesting is there now seems to be enough players that are projected in the top 8 that Taylor Hendricks, the 6'9", super athletic wing, 6'8", 6'9", 215. I mean, just perfect NBA body, super athletic wing. There seems to be a real chance that he becomes available. I'm going to poke some holes in the CBS Sports. No offense to Gary Parrish, I guess offense, but I just don't believe some of the things he says. So I don't want to take too much. ESPN, Ringer, Leaf, I think have a pretty good beat on it. So the 4th pick is the first choice. This is where Rafael Barlow's mentioned Cam Whitmore. Gary Parrish mentioned Cam Whitmore. Otherwise, it's a Thompson. But if you look at Kevin O'Connor at the Ringer, he now has a Sewer Thompson, not a Mon Thompson at 4. So that's getting a little interesting because, as we've talked about before, if Amon Thompson slips to 5, it doesn't really match what Detroit needs. Now, both the Ringer and CBS Sportsline have him going there and then have Cam Whitmore going 5. What's now interesting is if you look at the ESPN mock, they have the top 5, all the same players: Victor, Brandon, Scoot, Amon Thompson, and Cam Whitmore, not always in the same order. So does Leaf Tulane. So does CBS Sports. The only difference is Kevin O'Connor has both a Sewer and a Mon Thompson going in the top 5 and has Cam Whitmore dropping to 8. This is where you begin to see the fluctuation. By 6, at 6, as Sewer Thompson's on ESPN, Taylor Hendricks goes there at the Ringer, and Jerice Walker is Leaf Tulane. Walker is 7 for Indiana. So again, here, this gets super interesting. If you look at Leaf, Victor, Scoot, Brandon, Amon, Cam, Jerice, Asur in the top 7 picks, same top 7 picks as CBS, same top 7s as the Ringer other than Taylor Hendricks. And then ESPN drops Anthony Black in at 7 and has Jerice Walker slide to 8. So we're beginning to see this. Now, CBS throws a weird curveball and throws Jalen Hood-Schifino in at 8, which is kind of weird. What now happens that gets interesting for the Jazz is if you look at ESPN, Victor, Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, Amon Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Asur Thompson, all kind of seem normal. If Anthony Black goes 7, then Jerice Walker 8, Taylor Hendricks drops to 9. Okay? The Ringer doesn't have Anthony Black going until after the Jazz. Nor does Leaf Tulane. And Leaf Tulane is a little bit more of a big board than a mock draft. What's interesting, though, is Cason Wallace, who we've talked about a great deal, the point guard out of Kentucky. If Washington grabs a point guard, as many of us expect, at 8, it's another scenario where Taylor Hendricks drops to the Jazz. What's clear at this point, if you're the Jazz, Cason Wallace, 6 foot, well, debatable, 6 foot something, depending on his measurements and things like that. We'll call it 3. That's kind of what he's listed at. Point guard out of Kentucky, Taylor Hendricks, and Anthony Black. It really seems that 2 of those 3 will be on the board for the Jazz at 9. Now, there's always a chance that Jerice Walker drops or something else happens, right? It's you're playing games. But if you're the Jazz, this is the exact game you're playing right now. Is you're kind of trying to figure out what you're going to do in case the Taylor Hendricks drops to 9. So again, it feels as though right now, if you're Danny Ainge, you're Justin Zanuck, you're Ryan Smith, you're the crew, Bart Taylor, Marquise Newman, that Cason Wallace, Taylor Hendricks, Anthony Black, those 3, 2 of them should be available. In other words, the top 7, Victor, Scoot, Brandon Miller, Amon Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Asur Thompson, Jerice Walker, all seem to be, that's the top 7. That feels kind of consensus-y on the big board right now. And so if that's the top 7 consensus, then Washington, who's a huge freaking problem, goes 8. Washington's a problem to me. Now, and with a new GM, you have to predict. I do think people are going to have a hard time with Anthony Black shooting. Anthony Black's body is awesome. But if you're watching the NBA Finals, you got to be able to shoot. Like, that's just kind of the reality right now, is you just have to be able to shoot. So it does feel to me that one of those 3 drops. Now, part 2 of this question, and we'll do this a little bit in the next segment, is how do you rank the point guards and how much discrepancy do you have? Right? So I like Cason Wallace. Like if I did we almost should do like a point guard next. Maybe we will do this actually next week. I've got shows Monday through Thursday before I leave town. There are the following point guards exist for the Jazz that are all legitimately in play. So I'm not including Amon Thompson, but Cason Wallace, Anthony Black, and Cason Wallace. Just again, I don't expect you to know all these guys. So Cason Wallace, 6'3" Kentucky point guard. Anthony Black, about 6'7", Arkansas point guard, not a good shooter. Keontae George, about a 6'3", 6'4" guard out of Baylor, more turnovers and assists, maybe more of a 2 than a 1. Jalen Hood-Schifino, a 6 foot, decent size, 6 foot, they're all decent size, 6'3", 6'4", point guard out of Indiana, played with maybe the best rolling big in the country, not a good shooter himself. Kobe Buffkin, 6'3", 4" out of Michigan. Pretty interesting player. I actually like him a lot. Played off the ball a little bit more because they had a 5'11" diminutive quick guard. Nick Smith, #1 recruit in the country, knee problems, has slid down on a bunch of boards. There's those 6 point guards. I don't think I'm missing anyone. There's those. Well, Bilali Kubali out of the teammate of Victor played some point guard the other day in the game for the Metropolitan 90 seconds or whatever they're called, and has everyone super excited. So and there actually was a Rafael Barlow report that he might be the Jazz target at 9. I was going to talk about that more tomorrow. I just walked myself into it. We'll talk on that. So those are the 6, maybe 7 point guards. Pretty certain somebody's available at 16. Now, this gets a little tricky. You got to try to play that out. And so if Taylor Hendricks at 9, do the Jazz draft him because they need a point guard in this draft, but they get one at 16? It's just going to be one of those 6. If you don't see a great differential of those 6, then maybe that's not that big a deal. I don't know. We'll talk about some more, and we'll look a little bit deeper into Taylor Hendricks' game right now, if he's available at 9 and whether the Jazz should do that. And we'll talk about those point guard bracketing here in a moment as well, here on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Today is a Wednesday edition of Locked On Jazz, and it is brought to you by my good friends over at Intercap Lending. You know, I actually had something the other day. Dropped Steve Carter a note. I said to him, hey, if you have a minute, that would be like super awesome. Of course, Steve Carter calls me back almost immediately, and we had a nice little conversation about some mortgage rates, second mortgages, different construction, various things. He was just such an incredible resource. Steve Carter over Intercap Lending is our own personal loan officer. It's just simply the greatest customer service you'll ever receive. If you're looking to do something in this marketplace, it's not easy. I found it confusing. You're trying to figure out when rates and where they're going to go. What are my options? How do I keep myself the versatility I need long-term if the rates actually come back down? Things like that. Steve Carter is your answer. Plus, he gets the job done of getting you through the loan. Why is Intercap Lending grown so much? Because of the fact that they get loans done. That's what every agent, everybody involved was, because no one gets paid till the loan's done. So that's why Intercap has grown, because people are using them because they get the job done. You can call Steve Carter, our own personal loan officer. Make sure you tell him you're Locked On Jazz at 385-800-8528, or you can email me at dlock09@gmail.com. It's my pleasure to just hook you up because I like Steve Carter, and then I can say hi to him, and I like to help you as an everydayer. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. For more information, visit intercaplending.com. Today's show also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time answers everything you need to know when it gets to buying tickets. At least this is my experience, so all you guys can decide whether you agree or not. But when you're buying tickets on the secondary market, there's a lot of trepidation. My first trepidation is like, are the seats actually any good? Right? Well, Game Time answers that by getting images of your seats before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect. You're right. Okay, my second one is, this is such a pain. I have to go to multiple apps, compare pricing to figure out how to get the best price. Nope. Game Time has that answered for you as well. It's called the Game Time Guarantee. You always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And then, where are my flipping tickets? Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set, but then where do I find them? Well, tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Game Time has answered all of the issues of ticket buying. You can do it at the last minute. When you're looking for tickets, browse through the Game Time for upcoming events, concerts, playoff games, flash deals, last-minute deals are also available, and they do it all for you with images of your seats, with 2 taps to get it done, with it sent right to you, and with the Game Time Guarantee. So right now, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz our first listen of the day, your first listen. I greatly appreciate your support. I've tried to let you guys know this, so here's the plan. I leave town Friday. Well, I leave Thursday, but I'll do the show next week. And then Leaf Tuline's going to take you up and through the draft, which is great for you because he's better than I am. Starting on Friday. So that'll be a great week next week. I will be listening. I'll just be overseas. Graduation trip for the little girl. Super fun. So, life's what we got to do around here every now and then, right? Thank you for accepting that. All right, Taylor Hendricks. If he's at 9, do you have to pull the trigger on him? Super interesting player, so let's talk about him. I've watched a decent amount of him, and honestly, you get who he is almost immediately. Like, it's a funny, like, I admire and love the scouts who've probably watched him 25 times, and they're picking up interaction with teammates, hustle, things like that. Like, it doesn't take a lot of time to figure out who Taylor Hendricks is. He's 6'9", 220. The player, and I'll give Hoops Intellect credit for this, even though, frankly, he was actually the player he reminded me of prior to this. And then when he said it, I was like, yeah, I totally agree. Is Jaden McDaniels of Minnesota, who was a late first-round pick. But he's got that awesome 6'9", 220 body. The other thing about Taylor Hendricks that I love is 6'9", 220 just plays in our league. Like, whether it's Robert Covington is actually a decent model on him too. He might be, hopefully, he's actually pretty similar to Robert Covington. And there's just one thing I really think is important when you look at players and you're trying to figure out whether or not you like them is can you find, like, if you've got one comp on them, then I find it a little worrisome. If you've got 6 comps, 7 comps, it's hard to comp because there's so many like him. I think you're in good shape because it just means that they stay in the league. And there are so many guys that are of this size and this ilk that are so similar to these guys. His body is actually a little bigger than Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels really a string pull, about 185. I think this guy's got 15 to 20 pounds on him. He's just an elite athlete. Played at the University of Central Florida. There is a little concern to me that when I watch him, he's doing this against lesser players, and that suddenly a lot of the rim protection, the ability to block shots, the ability to always recover off a bad closeout, the ability of those kind of things that he's able to do are going to be diminished because he's not playing Samford and he's not playing some of those schools. Now, Central Florida, he held his own really well against Therese Walker. He held himself well when he played Oklahoma State and they played Florida State. So it's, maybe overplaying that a tiny bit. He does not have a great handle. He had a nice crossover drive on Therese Walker in one of the games I watched, but I would say generally it's not one where I'm watching him and thinking to myself like, oh, this is a super comfortable thing for him to do. He had another drive where he turned the corner and he got to the basket. It was kind of a rounded drive and the defense never quite got back to him. So I don't think he's right now. I think if you draft him, you're getting an elite world-class athlete. You're getting a pretty good shooter. Like, he made his shots from almost all from the corner, but it doesn't look like he's going to have a huge time stretching it out. You have a guy who I think if he fixes his footwork, works at it, just athletically gets better, can be a defensive player like a Covington or Jaden McDaniels and switch maybe 1 through 5 if he gets a little bit more weight on him. Kind of an interesting piece there that like might be able to be a 6'9" center. Not sure what I think of him rebounding wise, because I don't think his balance is great. And I don't think his strength is great. And again, those very easily can be cases in which you just get stronger. And I'm not going to lie, like I'm a little biased. Like I'm watching him play Tulane and Memphis and East Carolina and teams that aren't great. And it, or against guys that aren't other NBA players. And it makes me devalue a little bit of what I'm watching. But frankly, I did that with CJ McCollum and Dame Lillard and looked really stupid. So this is like one of the rules. There's a bunch of things that I like to look at NBA drafts and players and say, and one of those is, do they just bound off the screen? Taylor Hendricks just bounds off the screen. When he runs, it's incredible. When he jumps, when he defends the rim, he makes wow plays. It's there. Then can they shoot a little bit? Because we got to shoot in this league. And he can do that. He just like, he's got kind of like his best case scenario to me, his handle is going to reduce him ever being like a massive go-to scoring guy, but everything else about it is pretty good. So if he's at 9, it's a big flyer and with a limited downside to me, because I just think you get it. So then the question is, if he's at 9, are you now trying to play one of these point guards we were just talking about at 16? And if you look at if we go again with the guys we talked about, Cason Wallace, Anthony Black, Keontae George, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Kobe Buffkin, and Nick Smith. Those are the 6 I was going to talk about. Coulibaly probably needs to get in the conversation. It doesn't sound like Coulibaly, Wallace, or Black have much of a chance to get to 16. So you then really what it gets down to is you better have Keontae George, Jalen Hood-Schifino, or Kobe Buffkin, or Nick Smith as good as or close to as you have Cason Wallace, Anthony Black, or Coulibaly on your board. You better have those guys right on the level. And as I said yesterday, Nick Smith is this wild card to me. He was the #1 recruit in the country. Sometimes I think high school status is better than college status. Like, I'm not sure that watching these college games, it's a great way to evaluate players. I admire the scouts that are out there trying to do this. I think it's almost. And so now we're into a question of like, do you think Jalen Hood-Schifino's got a real shooting issue? Do you think Kobe Buffkin, do you think Nick Smith Jr. are as good? All of them are as good as Cason Wallace, Anthony Black, or Coulibaly. If you look at the ESPN mock draft at 16, they have Keontae George and Kobe Buffkin on the board for the Jazz. Just those 2. They have the other guys all going earlier. If you look at the Ringers mock draft, they have Nick Smith and Jalen Hood-Schifino on the board, but not the other guys. If you look at Leaf Tuline's big board, he's got Buffkin on the board and Nick Smith on the board. So again, the consensus I think that you can come to here fairly cleanly. And if you look at CBS Sports, again, I don't love this mock draft. They have Nick Smith. They have us taking Nick Smith on the board. He also has Kobe Buffkin on the board. He also has Cason Wallace, but there's just no chance. I'd be stunned. I don't love that mock draft. Who am I to judge, right? But I don't love that mock draft. I'm having a hard time, actually, other than Locked on NBA Big Board, The Ringer, The Athletic, ESPN, finding another really good mock draft. So to me, it looks pretty clear there's going to be 2 of those players available. You just don't know which 2. Kobe Buffkin seems like a real possibility. Nick Smith Jr. seems like a really good possibility. And Jalen Hood-Schifino. So now what do you think of those 3 at 16? And do you think they're all the same? I like Kobe Buffkin. I don't know that I like Kobe Buffkin dramatically more than I like Cason Wallace. Okay? And I need to watch Nick Smith more. I think he's really intriguing. Jalen Hood-Schifino has me a little nervous, maybe being unfair. He had the best rolling big in the country. I think he looks really good because of it. And then he doesn't shoot great on his own. That I'm not sure. I think he's of the same ilk. I got to watch it. I think I have an Indiana-Kentucky game on the docket for tonight. Super interesting strategy questions that are going on there. And then, frankly, you've just got to believe that Taylor Hendricks is such a good athlete at 9, you have to take the flyer on him, which I think is probably true. I guess the other scenario is, do you have somebody else at that position, like a G.G. Jackson, or it gets slim? You just can't find 6'9", 215. Leonard Miller, if he's going to get down there. Is there another athlete of the ilk of Taylor Jenkins that you really believe in? And maybe the answer to that is no, which then means the discrepancy between the wing talent and the discrepancy amongst or standard deviation of the point guard talent is less. And so you do play this game in this strategy in 9 and 16. All right, let's look at some of the hot rumors and all the rest that's going on in the NBA next. Thanks so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. Locked on NBA Big Board, just incredible. I got an hour drive I'm about to go do. I'm just going to listen. Just dive in, listen, more draft stuff for you. All right, some interesting stories. Okay, we look at the draft and the draft mocks and the rest. Indiana is being very public about what they're doing, which we greatly appreciate. They did a nice interview with Clowney the other day, and they're doing all this stuff. Indiana sits at 7. They're having Jerice Walker and Taylor Hawkins in for workouts today, or separately, but they're both working out for the Pacers. The Thompson twins are in Charlotte, who has the number 2 pick of the draft. So that's interesting. Though there are numerous reports and feeling that Brandon Miller will be the 2nd pick from Charlotte. The NBA free agent market had two interesting news notes yesterday of rumors. These are all rumors, but one is that Milwaukee will re-sign Chris Middleton. Middleton was kind of the player I thought might get available. His health has been less good. He's plus 30 years old. Milwaukee's got a money crunch. If I had to make a choice, as good as he is in Milwaukee, you're keeping Giannis, you got to keep Drew. I think you have to keep Brook Lopez over Chris Middleton. Crazy, I know, but I do. Money-wise, health-wise, defensive importance. I think Brook's great. And then the fact that Chris Middleton had kind of a cadre of injuries makes me nervous. But reports are. Another report that was really interesting is that the Orlando Magic have targeted Gary Trent Jr. as their number one person they're trying to get in the draft. Well, they're certainly trying to get more shooting. This brings me back to just a name that I have brought up a ton, and that's Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs, 6'4", 205-pound guard out of Gonzaga, was the 5th pick of the 2021 draft. In 2 years in the NBA, he has really just scuffled. His shooting percentage is 38.7. His three-point shooting percentage is 27%. And I've said it a million times, you can't shoot, you can't play. And particularly in the playoffs. To me, there was something, maybe I got bought in by the NCAA hype, but there was something special about this kid out of Minnesota through Gonzaga. 6'4", 205 pounds. I just thought he had amazing vision. I thought he had a little something to him. It has not worked in Orlando. They turned him last year into basically Royce O'Neal at the end of the year. He was playing 3 and sitting in the corner. He showed some flashes late in the year. Now, frankly, he showed flashes probably when they took the ball out of his hands, which I guess I shouldn't be excited about. He showed flashes in a period of time of the year where I'm not sure you should be that moved by it. Like, I got all the issues, but this is a player that I think if you loved him coming out of the draft and you're a team, someone should be going to get him. His last 26 games of the year, he shot 43% and 38% from 3. He was playing off the ball. His assist numbers were down. You'd have to believe that Jalen Suggs is playing with the ball in his hands and as a point guard. But Orlando at some point has to move off of him. Because if the rumor is true that they're looking to go get Gary Trent Jr., they already have Markelle Fultz. They already have Cole Anthony, who I can't imagine you're choosing instead of Jalen Suggs, but maybe, and that should probably worry us. And then at some point here, you actually have to decide whether you're extending Jalen Suggs, and if you have any doubt of that, you should go get something for him. Suggs is expensive. He's $7 million next year. He's $9 million on the club option. He's a restricted free agent in 25-26. Now, maybe you wait a year, but you're going to have to pick up that option here pretty soon. And Cole Anthony, you've got to sign here pretty soon as well. And Markelle Fultz is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So Orlando's got to make a bunch of decisions in that realm. And it makes me wonder, like, would they be willing to move him? And then really what your evaluation is. And if you're the Jazz and you suddenly grab Taylor Hendricks at 9, are you suddenly willing to go get Jalen Suggs with your 16th pick? When I brought this up to Tony Jones, he immediately dismissed it. I don't know. Now, Orlando's got a ton of picks, and the last thing they need is another pick, so that makes this a little difficult. But if they're really going after Gary Trent Jr., I do think that's interesting to hear that, and you wonder what the trickle-down effect of that is. Might not be true. But these are the games you're playing right now as you're trying to build a roster. Probably a conversation for tomorrow, but this was an interesting quote from Damian Lillard. I wish to have an opportunity to win in Portland. We got an opportunity to build a team. We have an opportunity asset-wise, in other words, that third pick, to build a team that can compete. If we can't do that, then it's a separate conversation we have to have. Honestly, I love Dame. Love Dame. If I'm Portland and I can draft Scoot Henderson and I can get off $63 million in 2026-27, it might be time. Tragic, difficult, but it might be time. Dame's got 45 and 23-24, 48 and 24-25, 58 and 25-26, and $63 million on the books at 37 years old in 26-27. You tell me that he's got the first 2 years, and I'll tell you, I think the Utah Jazz should go trade for him. You tell me he's got 4 years with 58 and 63. I tell you the Portland Trailblazers would have to give us stuff for me to trade for him right now. Have a great day. It is Locked On Jazz. Thanks so much to the everydayers and everybody who's a part of this show each and every day. It's certainly something I do not take lightly. Appreciate you. It is Locked On Jazz. Back with you tomorrow. Have a great day.